Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Kadare Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadbhaktaya Namo Namaha Vanchakalpatrubhischa Kripasindhuvevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Shri Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Dandavat Pranam devotees. So this is a very brief video to try to, probably in a nutshell and in a shortened version, speak on a topic that came up on one of the Sunday Zoom conferences that we have. So the title of that Zoom conference was the influence of Kali Yuga in the Vaishnava Mandal. So the topic originally arose because there was a great discussion on the fact that within the Vaishnava Mandal, especially at the time we're living in now, where ashram life is not the most prominent feature of those practicing bhakti now. In India it may be, but overall it's not like it was, of course, when our Srila Prabhupada initially established Krishna consciousness in the West, where regardless of your status as being married or not married or etc., most people took shelter of ashram life. And anybody who has lived through that period knows that ashram life was very insulating, from your morning program to your seva throughout the day to the evening program. It was very routine, it was very structured, it was very insulating. Now, of course, the congregational mode of practice has become more prominent. People living at home, working, conducting their day-to-day lives is the more prominent feature of how people are associating with the practice of bhakti. So because of that, then there's more of a porous nature to our Vaishnava Mandal, which means that there's the ability of more things which may not directly be related to bhakti, and in some cases may be harmful to bhakti, of seeping into the Vaishnava Mandal and becoming part of our common parlance in Vaishnava dealings. Also, certain words will get introduced into, not officially, but into the lexicon of Vaishnava philosophical or theological ideas. They introduce some words that have come because of, maybe a group of disciples having faith, obviously, which they should, in their spiritual master. The spiritual master may pick up a term or an idea or something from somewhere, introduce that into the Vaishnava Mandal, and that term becomes like a part of the lexicon in Vaishnavism. And though it may not have some root in coming from our Guru Varga, but it may be a more contemporary interpretation of something, or it may be something that's just popular in the contemporary pseudo-spiritual communities, or whatever it might be. So that enters the Vaishnava Mandal through that use of language by someone who's respected in the Vaishnava community. And now I'm speaking kind of relatively, because there's all different levels of who respects who and what and so forth. I don't want to really get into that. I'm just saying how things enter into the Vaishnava Mandal in different ways, and that's one way, through the adjustment of using certain kinds of words. So as an example, we may hear that, I'm trying to think of a term. It's hard, I don't really use a lot of these things, but be conscious, be love, right? So I've heard that kind of expression, be conscious, be love. So of course, we could, in our Vaishnava, philosophy, certainly take those two statements and see completely how they are Krishna conscious. But again, because we don't live in such an insulated environment where those statements within the ashram life, for instance, would be unpacked and flushed out to get at what they actually mean in Krishna consciousness, and where they don't align with the theology of Krishna consciousness, they would be dismissed. That's not happening now. So a term comes in, it becomes popular, and it becomes completely relative in terms of its interpretation, because it's used by, maybe those who are more experienced in bhakti and those who are not so experienced in bhakti. And therefore, be conscious, be love becomes, sort of a kind of something never been used by our Guru Varga, but it becomes a term that's starting to become commonplace. Or spiritual bypassing, or another one that we discussed on one of the Sunday conferences was toxic positivity. So various, in other words, my point being various, kind of sayings and slogans, etc., into the Vaishnava Mandal. They take on some weight because they're constantly repeated, and if not those direct terms, in terms which are similar. And now you start to have language starting to shape ideals. And of course, the large variety of levels of unfoldment in bhakti becomes important, because now we're not all living in an insulated environment. So somebody who's practicing bhakti from home, who's just relatively new in their practice, starts to utilize these kind of terms and what it means to them, what it stimulates in their consciousness in terms of maybe their background, is completely different from any sincere or realistic philosophical or theological application of those kind of terms in bhakti, right? Just like be conscious, be love could be everything from being conscious of having many lovers, just be free, be conscious, be love, right? To actually some, Vaishnava theological application of be Krishna conscious, be love means be, an aspirant for praying, bhakti, right? So, in other words, my point here being that huge gap of relative understanding of terms like that, when it enters into the Vaishnava Mandal, it starts to shape ideals, and those ideals start to shape behavior. That behavior starts to influence standards. Those standards then become more lax, more relative, and a certain kind of anything, everything goes starts to evolve as being open-hearted, another term, being accepting, etc., etc. So it goes on and on and on. So then what begins to happen is that the actual sort of solid line of theological understanding and the terms that are used to describe them that have come down in our Guru Parampara start to become equated or equalized, because if the terms are being used by somebody who's respected, right, and again, respect is a relative thing, in our Vaishnava Mandal, then those terms start to seem to take the same weight as concepts and terms coming down in our Guru Varga. And this is where things become a little bit dangerous, because then rather than people, especially who may be more in the earlier stages of unfoldment in the practice, start to equate that those kind of terms, whatever they mean to them, are equal to statements and terms which have been translated from Sanskrit to Bengali, etc., stated by our acharyas in Guru Parampara, that it's kind of all equal, it's kind of all the same. So this was the point of a whole class that we had on, maybe it was last Sunday, I think it was. It was last Sunday, about how these things also are in many ways agencies of Kali. Because in the Kali Yuga, the primary feature of everything is to relativize everything, beginning with relativizing the absolute truth or relativizing God. I've mentioned on a previous video that if you make the statement, well, to be accommodating to people, we accept that some people believe in God and some people don't. So we can't equate that. We can't say Yeah, some people believe in God, some people don't, and both statements are true because those can't be two true statements. There is a God or there isn't a God. There's someone who's conscious of God or not conscious of God. That can be a true statement. But there is a God or there may not be a God, and you have the option of choosing. That's not really a reconcilable statement. So as soon as we start on that platform, it's like starting 1 + 1 is 3, and any kind of math up to the highest levels of math after that are off. So, the foundational principle that there is an absolute truth. And though that absolute truth may have various expressions, and even when it comes to the various expressions, we have to vet the legitimacy, so to speak, of those expressions by seeing how they are in line with what's taught in those various systems. Whether it's from the Quran, whether it is from the Bible, whether it is from the Torah, whatever scripture or revelation may be there, if a system genuinely follows that, it is a genuine spiritual system, and it is the awakening of someone according to their individual level of consciousness. Of course, in Bhakti we say that Bhakti is not another faith system. It is a culmination of the realization of loving and serving God, which is the basis of also all these other systems. It's just that in Sanatana Dharma, it translates or transfers, from just the bodily conception of my identification with a particular faith to identification with the actual soul and the nature of being the servant of God in an eternal and realized and actualized sense. So it's not just a practice of my faith within my material life. It is actually a transformational process of realizing myself as the soul, and the soul having a body due to karmic experience under which I'm experiencing right now, but I'm the soul, I'm not this body, and therefore my position as the soul is absolute and paramount, right? So, but outside of those genuine faith systems, there are many other sort of concocted, conjectured systems of approach, either based on or some part of various true faith systems. Something is made up, and that's spread as another kind of spiritual reality. And when everything is relative, you don't have an absolute truth to base everything on and to vet things on, then it starts to become, there's a saying, yatamata tatapat. That was part of our phone conference discussion. What is yatamata tatapat? Literally means, tatapat, pat means path. So tatapat means there are so many paths, and yatamat means as many paths as there are that many conceptions and considerations. So bhakti is completely the opposite. Bhakti is the descent of an absolute revelation from the absolute personality of Godhead, in which one realizes their position in relation to the absolute truth and then makes the various life adjustments according to where they are to get to a point of actualizing their position as das, or servants of that absolute truth. So when you introduce relativity, you're actually introducing the agencies of Kali, because Kali is based on relativization, beginning with relativizing the absolute truth, relativizing the things that are tadiya with the absolute truth. Tadiya means that have connection with the absolute truth, like the process of bhakti, like sastra, like devotees or spiritual practitioners. You start to relativize everything. For instance, you can relativize what is the position of Guru. So rather than the statements of the Guru Vaga, the Acharyas, we can make Guru something that becomes relativized as, by consensus, we like this person. Or by consensus, we've considered this person to be loyal, institutionally favorable, etc., and award that person the position of Guru. So now that's a relativization of the position of the Akhanda, the absolute principle of Guru, which is Baladev Tattva, Nityananda Tattva. The reality of that position is uncompromising in the sense that those who are Vyasti Guru, means the individual presentation of Guru, they are the embodiment of the Shakti of Baladev Nityananda Tattva. They're not relative persons who everybody mutually agreed on. The person is very nice, they even speak nicely, and they're very loyal, and they don't have any observable bad habits, so we're good to go. It's not quite like that. So we would have to take the authentic statements, Tajman Guru Papajeta, Tadvidi Pranipatena, Acharyam Viganyam, right? So many different statements, and analyze those statements, Sastra Yukti Suni Punya, etc. Analyze all these statements of Sastra and our Guru Varga, these absolute statements, and then having a absolute conception of Guru Tattva, then align people with the ability based on that kind of information content to then develop their faith and repose their faith in the true conception of Guru as it is manifest in someone according to those absolute statements. Right? So, but if we just relativize everything and we relativize even the position of Guru, then things could be very, very dangerous. So there's a verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, and it mentions that Krishna Swa Dhamma Opagate Dharma Jnanadi Visaha Kalo Kalo Drisham Nasam Esha Purana Ka Danodita. So it says that in this particular time, in the Kali Yuga, Kalo Nashta Drisham. So Kalo means Kali Yuga. Nashta Drisham means the ability to see clearly is removed or destroyed by the influence of Kali. But though Krishna Swa Dhamma, though he's left for his own abode, and when Krishna leaves the world, then the direct prabhav of Krishna's presence, which supports Dharma, Gyan, real knowledge, Dharma Gyana, Adibi, and everything else which is related to the absolute truth, Adibisa, they seem to leave when Bhagavan leaves. Still here, Bhagavan leaves a presence. What is that presence? Purana called an Odita. So Puran here means Srimad Bhagavat Puran. So this Srimad Bhagavatam is directly Bhagavan himself. Tulya Bhagavata Krishna Vibhu Sabasrai Prati Shloke Prati Akshare Nan Artakai. The Srimad Bhagavatam is directly Bhagavan. So it says from here, Arka means the sun. So the brilliance of the light, like the sun coming from the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam, it will give guidance in an age where the vision has become darkened by the influence of Kali. So there are two types of Bhagavats also. Eka Bhagavat, Bhagavat Sastra means Srimad Bhagavatam is one form of Bhagavat. Or a Bhagavat, Bhagavat Bhakti Rasapatra. Or the person who is the patra or the container of Bhakti Rasa, meaning the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. So it is extremely important that through these two vehicles, that Srimad Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat, that we take shelter there in order to get illumination in the darkness of Kali. If you begin to take lesser forms of guidance and light, then because of the overwhelming influence of the darkness of Kali Yuga, then it's very possible that you will lose your way. An example would be that when the sun is up, your ability to see and navigate your way through places or things is completely different from when you have to use a flashlight, depending on how many lumens that flashlight is. Every flashlight's not the same, right? Lumens is the degree of brightness of a flashlight. So depending on how many lumens you have will be to what degree you can see. If you go out in a very dark area and you take a flashlight and only has 300 or so lumens, it may light up a very small area. So there's so much darkness that's still left. So in the same way, if we go to other relative practices and modalities, etc., right, and we try to equate them with being like the absolute truth, then it's like taking a flashlight with only a limited amount of lumens and comparing that to the sun. So, especially now where there's such a wide variety of presentations of spirituality, pseudo-spirituality, etc., it is important that we understand clearly what is the absolute truth, and therefore we have a reference point in order to compare and vet other things in relation to it. If we allow relativity to start to dominate within the Vaishnava Mandal, right, then that ability to discern the capacity of illumination of something becomes also relative, just like I spoke. Therefore, the process of what is guru can become relative. If there's a consensus, ecclesiastical consensus, social consensus, etc., we can select someone to be guru on that basis. Jiva Goswami Bhakti Sandarbha has completely spoken that this should not be done. Srila Prabhupada quotes this in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, chapter 1, text 35, in that purport, he quotes Jiva Goswami's Bhakti Sandarbha, that one should not accept a guru based on social, hereditary, customary, or ecclesiastical considerations. That guru should be accepted according to the absolute statements of Sastra. You understand? And this leaves room. Not that every guru or person who's performing the seva of guru may be Uttam Bhagavat who's come to Majjhim Bhagavat platform. I've spoken on this in another video, so I don't want to go through a whole nother discussion about that. But if someone is Sastrayukti Suni Punya Dhirishada Yandra, Uttamani Kari say Tare Samsar, Rupa Goswami said if they have eligibility to practice sadhana in Uttamadikar, that person may also Tare Samsar. He can help, she can help to guide others in the process of bhakti. One very key element of that is that they cannot have Guru Abhiman. No guru has Guru Abhiman, no real guru. Because Guru Abhiman means a self-conception of guru. But Guru Twa, or the nature of being guru, does not arise from the self or the Atma. It arises from the empowerment of the Shakti of Akhanda Guru Tattva. Srila Prabhupada quotes one verse over 50 times in his writings. Krishna Shakti Vina Nahi Tava Paratan. You cannot preach like Srila Prabhupada was preaching unless one is specifically empowered by Krishna. And in this case, the empowerment means the Shakti of Nityananda Prabhu. Right? I think there's one pranam mantra. I hope I can remember it. Yes. Srila Prabhupada has one pranam mantra. Guru Agya Sirasi Dharane Shaktavesha Swarupine. Right? This was written by, I think, Pujapad Govinda Maharaj. Right? The successor of Srila Bhakti Rakshak Srila Goswami Maharaj. Right? Who was writing pranam mantras because he was writing some book on the God brothers and the disciples of Srila Bhakti Saraswati Thakur. Right? So he wanted to write pranam mantras for them, and our Srila Prabhupada told you write as you understand and realize. So he wrote part of this pranam mantra, Guru Agya Sirasi Dharane. That our Srila Prabhupada took his Guru Agya, means the order of Guru Sirasi, on his head. Dharane, he held it on his head. Our Srila Prabhupada took the order of Srila Bhakti Saraswati Thakur to preach all over the world, and he held that on his head. So you can just as a pictorial representation, understand, if you're carrying something on your head, like I preached in Africa for many years, and I've seen the ladies there, they can go to bring water, or they may be carrying goods, but they can stack very heavy, tall, you see it in India as well, very heavy and tall stacks of goods and put it on their head and walk very erect without dropping or spilling or tumbling anything. But certainly they have to have concentration. Either that concentration has become innate at this point, right? But they have to have great concentration, because balancing something on your head very heavy could mean life or death in some cases if it drops, right? So our Srila Prabhupada carried the weight of the order of Srila Bhakti Saraswati Thakur to fulfill the prophecy of Mahaprabhu. This is a great prophecy of Mahaprabhu spoken in Chaitanya Bhagavat that was fulfilled by our Srila Prabhupada. He carried that weight of fulfilling that prophecy on his head. Right? So Srila Prabhupada says, without the specific empowerment of Nityananda Prabhu, right, which makes essentially Shakt Avesh, the absorption in that order of Guru, and the empowerment of Akhanda Guru Tattva makes Shakt Avesh. right? In order to carry out this mission. So Srila Prabhupada never had a self-abhiman, I am Guru. He revealed the empowerment of Akhanda Guru Tattva, and this is the real position of Guru. So even if someone is Shastakti Suni Punya, they will not have Guru Abhiman. And therefore, their ability to recognize the empowerment of Akhanda Guru Tattva on various levels is part of the reason they are qualified to be Guru. Because if they see, oh, one saying Pati Bhakta means like general in the army of Mahaprabhu was manifested, or high class of pure devotee, they will go along with all their disciples to receive Siksha at that place. They won't take any institutional consideration, any egoistic considerations. Oh, well, maybe my disciples will think this person is very high class, they may leave me. Right? Such things don't come because there's no Guru Abhiman, there's no sense of proprietorship. One considers that all of those who've come to repose their faith have come to repose their faith in Nityananda. And by reposing their faith in Nityananda, they are entering into the arena of Gaur Lila. And by entering into the arena of Gaur Lila, their desire to reach the goal, the sajja, of realization of Seva to Radha Krishna then becomes possible. So Vyasti Guru is that portal, that person who is the portal of receiving the faith of and the aspiration for the Seva of Radha Krishna. They become the portal for that. So if you obfuscate that position of Akhanda Guru Tattva, you're not really Vyasti Guru. You're not really the Prakash or the representation of true Guru. It is an Abhiman, a self-conception. Much the same way it's a self-conception. I am this body, this family, this gender, etc., etc. And therefore, your ability to genuinely give bhakti is certainly not there. Right? So this wasn't meant to really be directly about Guru Tattva, but it speaks to, because Guru is the most prominent thing in our unfoldment in bhakti, it speaks to the position that most can't be relativized because it's the most accessible way of Kali entering into the Vaishnava Mandal. So I did this because there were some devotees who, the tape of the class that happened last Sunday was not available. It somehow didn't come out. And because we do the class every Sunday, and you know, sometimes we tape it, sometimes we don't. I think sometimes we do tape it, but maybe some doesn't come out, and we weren't worried so much about that. But you know, some devotees, the topic they wanted to hear, and therefore I reached out to the host, but the host mentioned, no, this particular session did not come out well. So, you know, sometimes there's sound issues or other technical issues, whatever it might be, I don't know. So then I said, well, I will go back and I'll try to make a synopsis, basically, maybe not in exactly the same words, of what we spoke on that Sunday. And I think, obviously, the topic could be unpacked and could lead to a whole discussion. That's a whole nother thing. But at least I wanted to encapsulate what we spoke last Sunday regarding the influence of Kali Yuga into the Vaishnava Mandal, right? So we're not saying this is an absolute, this is happening. We're saying, well, actually we are. We're saying that, you know, potential for it is there. There's some evidence of it there. And overall, the Vaishnava Mandal cannot really be overtaken. Because as long as there's any pure Vaishnavas and sincere aspirants in the practice of bhakti, there is some protective coating, right? Because it's mentioned there has to always be some pure devotee on the planet, because the whole world is maintained by the fact that some devotees, some pure Vaishnavas are present, because the only purpose of this Srishti Lila is expressed in the verse Paritranaya Sadhunam and verses Anugrahaya Bhaktanam in 10th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, that Krishna performs his Srishti Lila here. And he only does that because of the possibility of giving pleasure to those pure devotees that are here. Right? So if there's no pure devotees, there's no purpose to this creation. At that time, the creation would just wind up. Right? So hopefully this gave a little bit of an idea of what we spoke about. And especially because the devotees who asked for it, I like very much these devotees. They're very sweet devotees. So hopefully this was helpful. And again, I'm always begging for the mercy of devotees and begging especially for the mercy of so many senior devotees who may be there. If I've made any mistake, please to give any correction. And if there's any benefit from what is spoken, know it to be the kripa of my Guru Parapadma Nitya Praveshtam Vishnu Par Paramuksa Sutra Sisiman Srila Bhakti Vedanta Goswami Maharaj, my Param Guru Dev Nitya Praveshtam Vishnu Par Paramuksa Sutra Sisiman Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj, our Srila Prabhupada, also Nitya Praveshtam Vishnu Par Paramuksa Sutra Sisiman, Acharya Keshri Srila Bhakti Pradhan Keshu Goswami Maharaj, and our whole Guru Varga. So my Dandavat Pranam devotees, Panchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Radhe Radhe.